Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something pretty cool and pretty timely, actually, given how warm it's been lately. You guys requested a deep dive on the Nordic data center market. And honestly, even I was kind of surprised by some of what we found. Get this, it's projected to almost double in size by 2029. To help break all that down, I've got our expert here with me.
Yeah, it's definitely a hotbed of activity. The report you shared highlights some really fascinating factors at play.
Okay, so let's get into it. Our main source today is the Nordic Data Center Colocation Market Size Growth Report. It came out pretty recently, October 2024. And just so everyone's on the same page, when we say colocation market, we're talking about data centers that house servers and equipment from lots of different companies. Like, imagine a shared space for data storage, kind of like a high-tech apartment building, but for servers. And this report goes into everything: market size, who the major players are, even the tech they're using.
And you know what's particularly interesting? It connects this boom in Nordic data centers to this larger trend we're seeing globally: sustainability.
Right. And the numbers they're predicting are pretty amazing. The report estimates the market will jump from, get this, $844 million in 2023 to a massive $1.61 billion by 2029.
Wow.
Right. That's a huge increase. Now, for our listeners who maybe aren't data center experts, that translates to a compound annual growth rate of 11.42%.
Wow, so the industry's on track for some major expansion there.
Absolutely. But the big question is, what's got everyone so interested in the Nordics in the first place?
Well, it's actually a few things, but a major factor is the region's dedication to sustainability and going carbon neutral. And that's something that's super attractive to these data center operators who are under more and more pressure to reduce their environmental impact, not to mention their costs.
So it's like they've hit on this perfect formula, doing good for the planet while also doing good for their bottom line.
Exactly. And it's not just empty promises either. The Nordic region has a natural advantage when it comes to renewable energy sources. Look at Norway, for instance, with all its hydropower resources.
So we're talking about these massive data centers, potentially being powered by completely clean energy. From rushing rivers and wind farms, that's pretty incredible.
Exactly. Having that kind of access to renewables is a huge incentive for these companies to lower their carbon footprint and reduce their dependence on those traditional, unsustainable energy sources.
It's like Mother Nature is giving them a head start. And actually, speaking of natural advantages, this report really emphasized how much of a game changer the Nordic climate itself is. I mean, yeah, it's got those beautiful fjords and everything, but those cooler temperatures play a pretty big role, too.
Oh, absolutely. The report actually mentions how data centers in the Nordics are able to utilize free cooling systems. They basically take advantage of the naturally cooler air and water temperatures so they don't have to rely so heavily on all those energy-intensive cooling technologies.
Now, for those of us who aren't engineers, could you maybe break down what free cooling actually is and why it matters so much?
Of course. Think of it this way. Data centers usually need really expensive cooling systems because all those servers generate a lot of heat. Free cooling, though, utilizes things like cool night air or even cold groundwater to help regulate the temperature. It's like Mother Nature is giving them a helping hand.
Wow, so they're basically getting a boost from the climate itself. That's incredible.
Basically, yes. I mean, it doesn't completely eliminate the need for traditional cooling, but it does significantly reduce their energy consumption, which of course reduces their carbon footprint and their cost. So it's a win-win-win situation.
It really makes you realize how much strategic thinking goes into deciding where to locate these data centers. But the report did mention that it's not all smooth sailing, even with all these advantages.
That's true. The report did point out that there are some global supply chain issues that are impacting the region, like it's causing delays in getting the essential power and cooling infrastructure, which then, of course, impacts project timelines.
So even with what seems like the ideal location, there are still hurdles to overcome.
Exactly. And that's where understanding these challenges is really important, especially for anyone who might be looking at the market and thinking of entering it. It's definitely not as simple as it might appear on the surface.
So it's this interesting situation where
Yeah.
the Nordics have all this appeal, but they're also dealing with these obstacles that could really impact how much they can actually grow. It's like we're seeing Econ 101 play out in real time.
Yeah, it's true. It's a really interesting case study, and it highlights something really important. Just having access to renewable energy and efficient cooling, it's not enough.
Hmm.
If the industry really wants to take advantage of the region's potential, They've got to find ways to deal with these supply chain issues.
Yeah, it's like they found the perfect spot to build, but they're missing some of the pieces they need to actually get started.
In a way, yeah. And this is where the competition comes in, and it gets interesting. The report pointed out some big names, Digital Realty, Equinix. They're already putting a lot of resources into Nordic data centers.
Right. Those are some of the biggest players in the data center world. But I think the report also mentions some newer companies that are just getting into the market.
Exactly. Companies like Elementica and Hyperco, they're entering the market, and they're coming in with their own approaches, their own strategies. Like Elementica, for example, they're focused on building data centers that are not only energy efficient, but they actually use the waste heat that's generated to heat buildings in the local community.
Wow. So they're going beyond just being environmentally friendly. They're actually finding ways to directly benefit the places they're located in.
Exactly. It's a great example of how data centers can be more than just these energy hogs. They can actually be a positive part of a community.
Yeah. It's like they're becoming part of the solution, not just another drain on resources. So now you have these major companies and these new innovators all competing in the same space. What do you think that means for the future of this market?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The report seems to think that this influx of new players is going to lead to even more innovation and, of course, more competition, which could be good for consumers, right? Lower prices, better services. But on the flip side, there's also the concern that there might be too much supply, and they'll need to plan really carefully to make sure that the growth is sustainable.
It's a tough balance. It seems like they want to encourage this growth, but not if it means sacrificing the very things that are making the region so appealing in the first place.
Right. And that's why the report stresses how important collaboration is. It argues that governments, industry leaders, even competitors, they all need to work together to build a sustainable data center ecosystem, something that will last.
So it's not enough for these individual companies to just focus on outdoing each other?
Not at all. Think about it. The challenges in this industry, the energy use, the environmental impact, data security, those are global issues. And finding solutions, it requires a global perspective. It requires prioritizing cooperation, taking shared responsibility. And the report suggests that the Nordics, with their history of collaboration, their openness to dialogue, they might be in a really unique position to lead the way.
So it's about more than just building data centers. It's about creating a whole new model for how to handle these challenges, right?
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole market so fascinating. It's like a live experiment in how to make sustainable development work. And it's happening on this huge scale. And the outcome, it's going to affect way more than just the Nordic countries themselves.
It's like they're setting a precedent for the whole data center industry.
In many ways, they are. Think about it. All the factors we've talked about, renewable energy, being able to use natural cooling, this commitment to sustainability, and that collaborative approach. It's like a blueprint,
Yeah, huh?
one that other regions, other industries could learn from.
It's like they're beta testing a new model for the entire digital world. And if they can actually make it work, the implications are huge.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's about showing that economic growth and environmental responsibility don't have to be at odds with each other. In fact, they can actually support each other.
And that's a message that I think everyone listening can get behind, even if they're not tech experts. But it does make you wonder, what does this whole Nordic data center boom actually mean for the average person?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It really makes you think differently about things.
Mhm.
I mean, usually it feels like it's one or the other, right? Like you can either have economic growth or you can focus on the environment. But the Nordics are showing that it doesn't have to be that way.
Which I think is something everyone listening can appreciate, even if they aren't, working in tech or anything. But it does kind of lead to the bigger question here. What does this whole Nordic data center boom actually mean for the average person?
That's a good question. And it's actually important for everyone, whether they realize it or not. It's about recognizing that we're all part of this digital world. You know what I mean? All the choices we make as consumers, as employees, as just people living in the world, those choices affect how much data storage we need and what it takes to support it.
So it's not just about where all this data is being stored, it's about how it's being stored and what values are driving those decisions.
Exactly. And the Nordic model, it shows us how much power we actually have.
Yeah.
I mean, we as consumers can actually shape how technology evolves just by making choices that support sustainability. We encourage the whole industry to be more responsible.
It's like voting with our wallets, but for data. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. And this is only going to become more important.
Yeah.
Because the need for data storage, it's growing crazy fast.
No kidding. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Nordic data center market, I feel like there's a lot to think about. Like, will the region be able to stay on top? Will they be able to handle all this growth without, compromising what makes them special in the first place?
Definitely something to keep an eye on.
For sure. And what about everyone else? What lessons can other industries learn from all of this? I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens, right?
Absolutely.
Sophie,
It'll be really interesting to see how it all plays out.
one thing's for sure. This whole Nordic data center thing, it's a story worth paying attention to. Not just for the technology itself, but for what it tells us about creating a sustainable future in a digital world. And with that, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But I hope you guys will keep thinking about these issues because this conversation, it goes way beyond just one region of the world.